Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. To begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral, unceded homelands of the Beothuk and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. I'd also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatuavut and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We strive for respectful partnerships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. I'd also like to recognize that today is Orange Shirt Day in honor of all of the Indigenous children who were sent to residential schools in Canada. My name is Gobina Nagaraja. I've been on the board of the YWCA St. John's for about a year now. This webinar tonight was developed through a partnership between the YWCA St. John's and the City of Mount Pearl. And it's the second in a web series, Diversity Matters. And we're really thrilled to be able to bring this to you tonight. We have a little note on privacy here. As you're aware, we're using the Zoom platform, and we would encourage you to review Zoom's privacy policy. The website is listed there, https zoom.us/privacy. We'd also note that your camera will only be displayed if it's user enabled, and this is a recorded session. If you have any questions about the collection or use of or disclosure of your information, you can contact Darren Wall at the City of Mount Pearl, and his email address is also listed there, dwall@mountpearl.ca. I'd now like to welcome Mount Pearl Councillor Lucy Stoyles with a message from the City of Mount Pearl.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if everybody can see me. Okay.
You're good, Councillor Stoyles.
Good. Okay. Sometimes you can't see. Of course, I'm one of the councillors with the City of Mount Pearl, and I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight and say how excited I am to be part of this great event. First of all, I want to acknowledge one of my colleagues who is also online, Councillor Isabel Fry. And hi, Isabel, I know you're on, and glad that you're back with us again this week. We had a lovely session last week and very informative. Also wanted to say thank you to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for their contribution through this series and towards the Partner Grant Program. Also, I want to thank the YWCA for the partnership that we have developed. Also want to thank Caitlin and I should have taken some water. Gemma for presenting tonight. Looking forward to great words from both of you. And of course, I'll be remiss if I didn't thank our own staff under the leadership of Brandon, who's been the lead hand in this. Also, Leslie and Jeremy, who have certainly played a big part in getting this feature together in this diversity matter and how important it certainly is. 27 years ago, actually, I ran first for municipal politics. And the first time I ran, I lost by 14 votes. And 2.5 years later, a by-election came up and I ran again. And I was very lucky and fortunate to be elected to the City of Mount Pearl. And sometimes when you get involved in politics, you wonder, why should I get involved in politics? Well, most people get involved because they want to help people and do the right thing and be able to be there to support other women in politics. Is certainly always have been something that I've always done and always have supported. So anybody who's interested in running for politics, I have sat down with many people and talked to them on how important it is to get women involved in politics. I can tell people think it's going to cost a lot of money to get involved in politics, especially municipal politics. And sometimes people do spend a lot of money, but you don't have to spend a lot of money to get elected. And I'd be only willing to meet with anybody that would like to have a one-on-one to talk about municipal politics or provincial politics or even federal politics. I've been involved in all helping candidates in all different areas in politics. And we need more strong women like the people who are online tonight. We need more people to put their name forward. We need more people to get involved in the community, in school boards and in your community. And that's what happens when you get involved in your community. You end up, people encourage you then because you've taken that step, and they will encourage you to go even further. And I never ever dreamed I would end up in politics, but I did, and I certainly have loved most every minute of it. There's always some difficult times and different challenges that we face along the way, but once you start into something, you're more encouraged than ever to move forward and even move on to the bigger and better things. And I always say to the people, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? So I'm encouraging everybody out there that's online tonight to consider putting your name forward for political office. And the other thing I will also give a bit of advice on is, if and when you get elected, don't forget who put you there. Don't forget the people. And the most important thing I say to people when you talk about running a political office and that, always get back to people in a timely manner. It's more important to get back to people. Sometimes they might want to hear what you have to say. You got regulations and you got rules to follow. You can't help everybody, but get back to people and let them know that you're trying and you're going to do what you can to certainly help them, because they're the people who put you there. Again, on behalf of the City of Mount Pearl, we're so delighted to be part of this, and thank you again, and I look forward to the session.
Thank you, Councillor Stoyles. Up next, we have Gwendolyn Schlump. She's the Executive Director of the YWCA St. John's, and she's got a message for us about the organization.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We're very excited to welcome you to this platform tonight and to be hosting this second in the series together with the City of Mount Pearl. This webinar series has been a year in the making. COVID certainly changed our initial plans. We were going to have this event online back in May. And as with many things this year, we've regrouped, and so we're really thrilled to have all of you here joining us, and to the great discussion which I know is to follow. We're looking forward to hearing what Caitlin and Jalana will lead us through in just a few minutes. Just wanted to let you know a few things about YWCA in case we are an organization you don't know very much about. We have been in the community of St. John's for 95 years. We were initially founded in 1925 here in St. John's. And so we have a very long history here in the province as a women serving agency. Today, we're still focused on issues around gender equity, but we have expanded our mandate and our focus to include gender diverse and 2S LGBTQIA folks in our work for equity as well. So we work with an intersectional lens, and what that means is that we consider how identities such as race, language, culture, experiences such as poverty or geography or immigration, a myriad of things such as that can impact inequities as well. And so we're really excited about the discussion that is going to follow, and this felt like a very natural partnership as we thought about increasing diversity and how our community, how our cities and our province and our province is represented federally as well was a really important discussion for YWCA to be having. So very thrilled to be joining you together with Mount Pearl today. So YWCA has our offices in the downtown area of St. John's. We're part of a national and a global movement. YWCA is the country's oldest and largest women's organization and includes 32 member associations from coast to coast to coast. We're operating in more than 400 districts and communities. And as a national movement, we meet several times a year to set priorities and to review our advocacy, directions and so on, and work towards shared standards and keep one another accountable within the YWCA movement across the country. Together, we have national advocacy strategies and campaigns that combine grassroots action on the local level as well as national action, and really can create a national impact. So we're proud of the fact that our collective work across the country can truly impact policy decisions on various issues surrounding gender equity. So some things we worked on in the recent past include childcare, housing, advocating for sexual assault training for judges, as well as gender-based violence, just to name a few. If you don't know very much about YWCA St. John's or what we do, we invite you to visit our website, learn there a little bit more about our newcomer services, our childcare development, as well as our new youth employment program, which is called Launch. So for all of these reasons and all of these diverse program areas and gender equity areas, we're really interested in this topic and thrilled to be partnering with the City of Mount Pearl. Welcome you jointly with them tonight, and looking forward to engaging with you all as we talk about diversity and why it matters. Over to you, Gobina, and thanks so much for hosting us tonight.
Thanks, Gwendolyn. I'm really excited now to introduce you to our outstanding presenters, Jalana Lewis and Caitlin Urquhart. Jalana is a policy lawyer who managed the successful campaign of Lindell Smith, the first African Canadian candidate to be elected to Halifax's Regional Council in 18 years. And she also happens to be currently working on his second campaign. Jalana has done extensive advocacy work related to access to justice and on behalf of the African Nova Scotian community as well. Caitlin's an activist and private practice lawyer who managed the successful campaign of Maggie Burton for St. John's Municipal Council. She also gives her time to a number of community organizations that focus on the advancement of women and decolonization. Both Caitlin and Jalana are quite immersed in the communities that they share space with, and they seek to change the status quo. They push for advancement and reform, and I could go on about how outstanding they are. So we're very fortunate to hear from them tonight. Just a quick note before I turn it over to them, that there will be a question and answer period. And if you have any questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. I'll turn it over to Caitlin and Jalana now.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. Good to be here virtually.
Yes.
Our volume, everything is good. You can see us, you can hear us. Thumbs up from Gobina. Excellent. Okay, great. Caitlin, do you want to?
So I'm going to take it. I'm going to start us off if you're, if everything volume is good and all that. Looks like it's working. So as Gobina mentioned, Jalana's in Halifax working on Lindell's current election campaign with the election date coming up very shortly. October 16th, is it? 17th, so very imminent. Mm-hmm. And as folks here in St. John's will know, I'm in St. John's, will know we have an election coming up in September. Well, we currently have a ward by-election happening, and we'll also have a full election of the municipal level in September of 2021. So that's just a year away. And we just wanted to start with telling a little bit about our story and how we got involved in these campaigns. And so my story, essentially, I got a phone call from a friend who asked if I would meet a friend who happened to be Maggie Burton. And we chatted, and I was really sort of inspired by this young woman. She's 26 years old, and she's running to, for political office as an at-large candidate, which means she's running against some pretty heavy hitters, some folks who've been on council for a long time. And just her vision I really connected with. And she at that time asked me if I would consider being her campaign manager. And I was like, Me? No, I've never done anything like that. I have no, I wouldn't know where to start. And so I said no. I had no experience, and I didn't, I couldn't do that. And then I kept thinking about it, and I sort of learned more about her campaign. And I was very fortunate for myself that Jalana had actually done it because of our election schedule the year before. And I had seen this woman who, is graduated from law school just before me, and seeing her managing that campaign, which was so successful and became like nationally recognized as this incredible campaign, made me feel like, okay, maybe I can do this. And so, I got to work and did some research and did some reading and connected with people who'd done it before, and, and just sort of trial by fire, like went for it. And, and then that's sort of the history of how I ended up as the Maggie's campaign manager. So Jalana, did you want to tell a little about your story?
Sure. So I had zero campaign experience. I hadn't participated in kind of organized politics before. I hadn't volunteered on a campaign before. I had known maybe some family members or a couple who had run or were trying to be nominated by political parties in the past, but I didn't really understand municipal, provincial, or federal politics in terms of how people become elected. But I would say that I was engaged kind of at a level in terms of watching the news, reading newspaper, online news. So I had a general idea what was going on, but I didn't really understand how people went from unelected to elected and in their roles serving constituents. And so how I became involved, a bit similar to Caitlin, myself and Lindell Smith, who's currently counselor in Halifax, the candidate at the time, a mutual friend introduced us. And I think I had reached out to that mutual friend to ask them to introduce us because I was just planning on making a small donation to Lindell's campaign. And I thought I should meet him before I donate to his campaign. And the timing worked out well. So we met, and during that very informal conversation, I asked who his campaign manager was, and Lindell and the mutual friend kind of looked at each other and then looked at me and laughed. And I looked at them and I laughed because I knew what they were thinking. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do this because I have no idea what this means. So I actually kind of left the meeting, and a few weeks later I had time to think about it. And the timing in terms of my work just kind of the pieces of the puzzle all fit together. And I thought maybe I could do this, and why couldn't I do it? And so then I became his campaign manager. So we knew of each other, but we didn't know each other. We had a lot of mutual friends, and we were from the same part of the city, and we're both from the district that he ran in. So that was really, really helpful. But I didn't really know what city councilors did. I didn't really know what cities and municipalities could do. So it was all very, very new to me. And I was pretty close to saying no. So I just say that to encourage folks to know that you can step into this without having much experience or having no experience at all. Yeah, so Caitlin, do you want to talk a bit about
about the campaign, sort of
a
little bit. We were going to give a bit of some highlights of of the campaigns that that we're talking about, or that we've had experience with. And so I think that folks who are from St. John's will remember, I feel like there was sort of a feeling that Maggie's campaign really resonated with a lot of people. I think that in the 2013 election, where there was not a single woman who was elected in St. John's, I think that really sort of drove home for folks the lack of diversity and the lack of particular, at least in terms of gender, let alone all sorts of other Black, Indigenous, people of color, folks with lived experience of poverty, all sorts of, you know, the types of issues that often come down to a municipal level. There weren't people that had those sort of direct experience. There weren't a lot of people with those kinds of lived experiences. So I think that having a young woman, a mother of two, who had lived in the gig economy, had you know, all of these experiences that were really people could relate to, and it was so evident. We had over 150 volunteers, and those weren't like one-time volunteers. They popped in and then never came back. People came back night after night after night, and they were knocking on doors, and they were doing data entry, and they were making food, and they were manning the phones. They made a website, like everything. People were volunteering to do all sorts of things, and they were so engaged, and they had so much passion and commitment and enthusiasm. And I think that was because they really saw themselves reflected and saw their values reflected in Maggie. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Maggie got over 20,000 votes. The only candidate that got more votes than her was Deputy Mayor Sheila O'Leary. So she got more votes than the mayor, and which is a resounding success. At least that, you know, certainly more than we had anticipated. So, and she got the most votes of any of the at-large candidates and all this. So obviously, from our perspective, ultimately what you're trying to do is get your candidate elected, and that was a resounding success. But I think more than that, she really generated a conversation around why women and why diverse voices need to be in politics. So that was another really successful piece of the campaign. So Jalana, you want to speak to your experience?
Sure, thank you for that. I'm just getting some text from my mother. Shout out to my mom, Wanda Lewis, who's tuned in with us. So in terms of Lindell's campaign, so he was first-time candidate, and he was running in a district in the city where the incumbent at the time, it was her second term, and towards the end of her second term, so I should say that the incumbent at the time, I want to say there are 11 councilors plus the mayor on Halifax City Council. So prior to 2016, I believe there were 3 women on council. And the incumbent for Lindell in my district, one of the 3 women, she had said towards the end of her second term, I'm not going to reoffer because we need more diversity on council. And I believe she only made the comment once, and I don't think she really followed up on it. But in a sense, I think it was okay that she didn't, because she just kind of left it, and people could make of that what they thought. So she's one of 3 women on council. And she says, I'm not reoffering because we need more diversity. And so Lindell, before I became connected to his campaign, he was actually going around trying to encourage people to run for that seat, because it was opened up. So this is exciting. Who's going to be the new councilor? And then from what he's told me, every time he kept asking people, you should run, you'd be great. And they would all say to him, no, you should run, you would be great. So he also did not at all imagine himself as a candidate. So both of us were very new to this and didn't imagine ourselves in these roles. In the end, there ended up being 7 candidates in the district who ran. Lindell we started pretty early. I think we started around July because we were really nervous and we didn't know what to expect. And I should say the election's always around mid-October. And the slogan for his campaign was "It's Time." And I think that really resonated with folks for lots of different reasons. I should also say Lindell, when he ran, he was 26. Also parent, his daughter was 6 years old at the time. So pretty busy. And working at the library. So very kind of in the community, everybody knew him. But it was not something that felt natural. So we had no idea what we were up against. We didn't imagine that there would be 7 people in the running, and that was pretty nerve-wracking because there's no polls, so you have no idea what's going to happen until the night of. But in the end, we ended up kind of on this journey with lots of volunteers. We didn't have as many volunteers as you did, Caitlin, which is impressive because that just makes me think you had to coordinate all those folks, and I'm having a hard time coordinating people right now myself. But we had a lot of people who helped out, and grateful for all that help. So I'm just going to talk about the agenda quickly. So Caitlin is going to talk about where do you begin? So you're thinking about, or maybe you're going to do this for sure, you've decided, so where do you start? And then I will talk about mobilizing teams. That's a big part of it. But then sometimes, and you also end up doing a lot of work yourself as a manager or candidate, but then there's always a team, even if it's just family and close friends, there's always a team. And then Caitlin will talk about getting out the vote, and then we'll both talk about hurdles and successes of the campaigns. And then we'll have a Q&A. So that is how things are going to flow for the next little while. So Caitlin, I'll let you talk about where to begin.
Awesome. And did we want to do a quick, some participation to start?
Yes.
We just want to get a bit of a feel as we get into this, where people are at right now. So I'm thinking, I'm just going to, hopefully folks are familiar enough with the Zoom platform, but you should be able to, and write in the chat if you can't, raise your hand. So I'm going to ask a question, and then if folks can raise their hand, and then you can write, and or you can write in the chat. So the question I'd like to know is whether folks have worked on a campaign before. And I'd love to know what kind of a campaign. So was it a political campaign? Was it an advocacy campaign? Were you in student government? What type of a campaign have you done? If you can raise your hand if you've been involved in a campaign. I don't know if that's possible on this. I'm finding, oh yeah, I'm seeing some hands raising. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, raise your hand if you've been in a campaign, and if you can type into the chat what type, just generally, just so we get a bit of a sense of what folks have done before. So this is great. We're definitely seeing, we've got 4 hands raised here. Some folks not involved in any kind of organized politics. So I think Jalana and I were both saying neither of us had been prior to this involved in organized politics. I had some experience with student government and some sort of advocacy type campaigns, but never in organized politics. So that's, yeah, that's not a bad place to start. Anna Isabel volunteered. So Anna's volunteered on 2 provincial campaigns. So also really interesting in that it's quite different in a provincial campaign because you're dealing with a party as well. So your messaging, your policies and stuff have to come through sort of that, lens of the party as well. Awesome. So Courtney's been involved in an advisory council. We have Sandra has been involved in provincial and municipal. Some other folks, Cassandra, not involved in organized politics, but student societies at university. So that's great. As well, Chamber of Commerce. So again, so different types of campaigns, there. And that's excellent. And you're able to, just trying to see here. So those are really transferable skills. And I'm wondering, can everybody hear me? Just want to make sure that you can hear me there. Okay, great. Sorry. My screen went a little funny. So thank you. But so those skills that you learn from being involved in any kind of campaign, but also, you know, through work and various different things can be very much applicable to a potential political campaign, whether that's as a candidate or as a campaign manager. So it sounds like we have quite a bit of skill there. And the other thing to be mindful of is these people, these folks, you know, unfortunately we don't get to meet in person, but these are also resources. think about your networks, your networks. Sometimes you may not know the right person for a job, but somebody that you know knows the right person. So that's, you'll notice that both Jalana and I said that we were connected to the candidate through a mutual friend. So it wasn't somebody that we knew directly, but it was somebody who was through our networks. So keep that in mind. It's really important to think about the broader networks. I think that Jalana just sent me a note that she has some internet.
I'm back.
She's back. Okay,
back.
excellent.
Did you ask the second question?
I haven't yet, so
okay.
All yours.
So the second question is, have you ever considered running but didn't end up putting your name forward in the end? So is there anybody who thought about it? Maybe you told a few people, maybe you kept it to yourself. I see 2 raised hands. Thanks for sharing. It's good. I appreciate your honesty, and that happens a lot, especially since elections come around. We can rely even through the pandemic. And we thought in Nova Scotia, the municipalities actually asked the province to postpone the election, and here we are. Online voting opens, at least in Halifax, on Tuesday. So we've got a few people who said they thought about running, but didn't. And then someone shared, I'd love to, but couldn't handle that level of scrutiny. I think a lot of people can relate to that. People can relate to feeling like they have responsibilities at home that wouldn't allow them to run. Perhaps they're just the thought of being so public, or financially, fundraising. Someone said they're interested in politics, but it's interested. Oh, I missed that. I'm interested in politics, but it's been more interest than politics itself. That's fair. I can relate to that. Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, talk about it often. Your friends might say, you'd be great, or you might find yourself saying to friends, you'd be great. But I think it's that big step to actually put your name for it. And sometimes it's about timing. And if you thought about it and you didn't put your name for it, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Do you want to ask the third question, Caitlin?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I like the first time thinking about it or considering it. So if you're thinking about running for political office, I'd like everyone just to take a moment to think about their brand or their campaign. So what is the reason that's driving you to want to get involved? Is it, is it a specific issue, or is it something that you feel like you have to offer that you think is important? And then if you can think about 3 words that would describe your brand or campaign, what would those words be? And whether or not you're actually, we're not following up to make sure you're running. No. We would encourage everybody to consider, but you can either type it in the chat, and I just realized that I actually can, if you've got your hand raised, I can allow you to speak. So if folks feel comfortable.
And I'll let people know. So Lindell's slogan was "It's time," and I think that really tapped into the fact that there hadn't been a person of color on city council in Halifax for 18 years. He's also younger, kind of a fresh face. So maybe it's time for something different. His slogan this time around is "Progress Together." So folks are talking a lot about policing, affordability, safe and accessible communities, transportation. So this time we're kind of focusing on, okay, we've identified those big issues. For the past 4 years, he's started to address them, but now it's time to kind of work together so we can make that change together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Both great slogans. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if Anna had her hand raised before, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So I'm going to put it down. And if you would like to let us know, let's do it. That's great.
Yeah.
And I know, for example, in terms of the brand that for Maggie, it was very much about being professional, being friendly, and I'm going to say relatable was really where we were going in terms of her brand, because especially as a 26 year similar age, they had children. It's so interesting. A lot of parallels there. But she was a young woman, and so there's often a lot of perceptions that that you're not prepared, or you don't have the experience, that you don't have that you can't sort of that you can't be professional. And so really making sure that we communicated that. I love intersectional, inclusive, and integrous. Very cool. Authentic, approachable, and action oriented. Love my community. Those are all awesome.
Yeah,
really, really good.
Yeah.
Innovation, sustainability, and looking to the future. Really awesome, folks.
You're ready. People are ready to launch their campaigns.
I love it. That's really great. Okay, and so you folks can feel free to continue using the chat and chat amongst yourselves, and we won't necessarily be able to monitor it the whole time, but we'll try and kind of check in periodically. If you have any burning questions or anything that you really want us to address, please put them in the Q&A if it's directly for Jalana and myself or Gabina, just so that it flags, because we won't always have a chance to.
And that's just at the bottom of the screen, says Q&A. So you click on that and enter your question, and then we can come back to it later.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, and so Ophelia Ravencroft, who's one of the candidates in the current by-elections, Transform Your City, that's also really, really excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit. Now we've got your branding all done and sorted. We're like ready to jump right in terms of what do you need to do to when you start thinking about running for election. And so right now you have a year. So we have 1 year to a municipal election. So it's a great time to start thinking about this. And similar to when you're thinking about your branding and your campaign, you want to ask yourself why. Why is it that you want to run? Because your why is going to get you through those long days out knocking doors, the hard decisions. That's what's going to allow you to kind of work through all that. So you want to know, why is it that you're running? Is it because you didn't like a decision that your council has made, or a series of decisions, or you just want to see your own perspective or similar perspectives reflected in council? We want diversity around decision tables. So that's, that can be a perfectly good reason, but you need to know that sort of deep down in you, because you're going to need that to get you through. And you're also going to use that in terms of what is your brand? What is it that you're trying to achieve? So when the next step you're going to want to do is get engaged in local politics. Whether that means on Facebook message boards, or whether that means calling into the radio, or whether that means going to public meetings, get involved in the issues that you're passionate about, figure out what's going on, what the status is, when are decisions being made, how are decisions being made, and do your best to raise your profile in those spaces. So particularly with issues you're passionate about, it's a lot easier to learn and do the research and figure out where they're at, so that you can get involved and help move that conversation forward. And at this point, it's a good time to start doing your research. So do your research into the issues that you're passionate about, but also into whose sphere is it? Who's responsible for these decisions? You don't want to go out and set a big platform or campaign that's all about, fisheries, and you're running for municipal office, because you're going to be outside of the jurisdiction. You're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to actually be able to make change. So it's really important to make sure that you understand the role, what the job description of a counselor is, if you're running for city council or for whichever position it is you're running for. So, do the work. What's the job description? What are the expectations in terms of meetings and constituency work and compensation and all these types of things, you're going to want to know that information before you just, take the plunge and go ahead. You want to know what it is that you're signing up for. What's the job that you're agreeing to do for the next 4 years, usually. In that research, you're also going to want to look at the election rules. Really important, as soon as you can, figure out what the key dates are and put them in your calendar with reminders and highlights and whatever you need to do to make sure that you do not miss any key dates. You need to know when you have to get your nomination papers in by. You need to know when your finances need to be submitted by. You need to know all those key dates, and they should be in your calendar as soon as possible so that you just don't miss anything, because it would be terrible to have started your whole campaign and have everything set up and then you miss the nomination date and you can't even run. It's not a great feeling. So know the rules as well. Right from the outset, give the rules a read through. If there are materials from the municipality or from the province about how the election is run, read through those too. You're probably gonna have to read them a bunch more times throughout the campaign, but give them a first read through so that you understand where you're starting from. Make sure that you know how to get your name on the ballot and know how to do all those sort of initial things. One of the initial things that you're going to want to do as well is finding a campaign manager. So as I was saying, it's really important. It might not be somebody in your network, might be somebody in someone else's network, on one of your connections network. So put the word out, put the feelers out for people who have those skill sets. It can be full-time, part-time, paid, volunteer. There's a lot of different sort of moving pieces and different parts of, options in terms of what it might look like to have for a campaign manager. You can speak to people who've run before, who their campaign managers might be, and you can also put it out through your networks to see if there's somebody else who might be able to do that with you. And Jalana's going to build on that and just talk a little bit about, sort of once you have that person in place, how do you mobilize that team from there.
Okay, great. So I am going to share my screen. So let's see here. Share screen. Share. Excellent. How's that, Caitlin?
That looks good to me.
Okay, so what does it mean to mobilize a team? And so the definition is to put into movement or circulation. So thinking about creating a buzz, creating some attention, and this can take a lot of work. Next slide. Okay, so these are kind of some of the words that I think about when I think about mobilizing. So activate, propel, rally, organize, put into motion. So, maybe the team in my instance, the team has been dormant. The team has not been active in 4 years. So it's funny when I ask people for help or when I ask them, do you want to be in Lindell's campaign video? Everyone keeps saying last year, but then we keep remembering this was 4 years ago and time goes by really quickly. So I had to reactivate the team and kind of re-rally and kind of put into motion a team that existed before. And now it looks a little bit differently, especially with the pandemic. So this is, I'm in terms of my experience, and I could be missing some steps, but I'm thinking about team mobilization in 4 steps, just to keep it simple. So the first one is planning. So identifying your goals. So what is it that you want the group to accomplish? Obviously, if I use Lindell's campaign as an example, we want the team to come together so that he wins. Best case scenario is he wins, and I think it's okay to think about worst case scenario. I think worst case scenario would have been that he came 7th in the race. And maybe it would have been great if he came 2nd. Maybe we would have thought about it as a victory even if he came 3rd. And so implementation. So you plan and then you have to implement. And so you have to think about what roles do I need to fill? Maybe I need someone to help with social media. Maybe I need someone to help with signs. Maybe I need a volunteer coordinator. Caitlin, I hope you had a volunteer coordinator. Yeah, great, because that in of itself is a job. And so you're thinking about kind of getting the team off the ground. You're ready to go. So what do you have to do to make that happen? And then next you're thinking about, so the team's together and now you're trying to move towards that final goal. And I think that this image of a chart is helpful because you do have kind of highs and lows and dips, and sometimes this could even be the number of people working on your team. You might have 20 at one point, 50 at one point. Election day, that's when your team is probably going to swell and be the largest. So you're planning, you're implementing, and then you're kind of making your final push to make sure that you're getting to where you want to be. And then at the end, you have to wrap up. And I add this because I think it's important to think about ahead of time. And how will you demobilize the team? So again, I'll use the example of Lindell's campaign. So we made sure to kind of thank people throughout the process, and definitely thank people at the end. We mailed people cards, and we had like a gathering to thank people. So we're giving people a chance to meet each other. Some team members hadn't met each other before because they were doing different things. And people had something to share in common. And of course, he won, so that was exciting too. And the other thing we did, a year after he won, we sent an email to say, it's been a year. 2 years later, we sent an email to say, it's been 2 years. Thanks again for all that work you did, because if you hadn't have, he wouldn't be in his role. And so doing that and maintaining those connections, even in small ways, made it easy for me to, for example, reach out to a volunteer who helped canvass, which we're not canvassing this time. And I said to her, can you be in a video with Lindell tomorrow morning at 7:30 in the morning? And she said, hey, Jalana, I haven't heard from you in 4 years. I hope you're well, but I'd love to be in his video, just because we had those kind of moments, those kind of small interactions in the past couple of years. So it made it easier to return to folks and to ask them if they'd be willing to help out. So when not to mobilize a team, I think, if folks are already in place, maybe you have a team around you already. And sometimes you want to keep things simple. Maybe you're running and there's nobody running against you. Maybe you are in a role already that allows you to engage with people in your everyday life. So sometimes you don't need a big team. So for instance, right now with COVID, we don't really need a big team, and we don't want a bunch of people to sign up and then we don't really have much for them to do, because that kind of leaves people feeling a bit funny, or I volunteered, but they didn't call me. So I would say in this instance, based on what's happening, because we have experience, we've got a small team, but we don't need to kind of mobilize the same type of team. We need to actually keep things very simple right now. So things look a lot differently. And so what happens when a team's mobilized, but the next steps aren't in place? And when I saw this slide, it made me remember I really need to email some folks who reached out about volunteering, because, like I said before, you don't want people you don't want to lose that energy, that excitement, that momentum. If folks are really excited and then they just never hear from you. And, I'm going to need a lot of people to help out on election day, but I don't want them to hear from me 5 days before election day. I need to let them know now this week. So I'm making a mental to-do list, that I'm going to need them on October 17th, and I'll give them a heads up now about what we'll need. So that when I reach out again on the 13th to remind them they've heard from me before. And great things to think about, and I'm going to put the next slide up too. So you got your team, you got your goals set, you have your details are clear. So I made a Google Form survey, which is really great and free. So I created a survey for folks to say, put their email, name, phone number, and then they can check boxes. I can help on election day. I can help promote online voting. I can help put signs, and then they just submit. So now I have a chart that says who can do what, which is also really helpful with COVID, because there's some folks who just want to help from their house, and there's some folks who are comfortable leaving their house to help out. And energy's high, I think, with this time around. It just looks a lot differently. And so what would be bad if I don't follow up immediately, long communication gaps, and nobody knows what's going on. So in terms of identifying team leaders and partners, you want to think about the right team leader. So you might have a sibling or a partner who says, oh yeah, I'll be your campaign manager, or a best friend, or whoever. And we're friends, or, but do we work well together? So you want to think about who's the right team leader. Are they someone you can actually rely on? And can you imagine them really going on this journey with you? So you want someone who's passionate. It takes a lot of time. Typically, people are doing this unpaid, or quite often, especially with municipal campaigns. So you want someone who's really excited about the issues. You want them to have the right skill set. So there's a lot of writing that happens. We're getting a ton of surveys to complete, which reminds me there's a survey that's due today, and I forgot to remind Lindell about that, so I'm going to write that down. Can you tell?
We're so lucky. Yeah. We're so lucky to have you with everything that's going on. It's so
This is good for me, though. This is
just little reminders.
Yes. Yeah. So writing is something that happened. There's a lot of writing, a lot of kind of policy writing. Folks want to know what you're going to do for their neighborhood playgrounds. Chamber of Commerce might have a questionnaire. Environmental groups might have a questionnaire, all types of questionnaires, and they all expect you. Media outlets have questionnaires, they all expect you to complete them, and if they don't, sometimes they can kind of shame you publicly and say, this person didn't complete our questionnaire about education, schools, parks, and they don't have to say anything, but with that, they can kind of show maybe they don't care as much. So you want to have folks who can help you with the public speaking piece, with the coordinating piece, with the writing piece. And maybe that's not one person, but you just want to make sure at least that the leader is comfortable finding help when needed. And availability, that is huge. Because a lot of time. So you want to make sure that the leader of the team is someone who isn't going to bail on you halfway through or at some point, or they're not going to disappear right now. So we are 2.5 weeks away from the campaign. Right now I'm talking to Lindell on the phone probably 3 to 4 times a day. He's in council right now. So we actually had a meeting this morning with 2 team members who are from 2016. And then we couldn't talk today. So we're texting all day, and then we're going to talk tonight about some things. So I have to be available to be in constant communication with him, and that's super important. So that's all I'm going to say about mobilizing a team, but just make sure that you're in touch with people and you're respectful of people's time, and you're thanking people, and you're choosing leaders who will also do the same thing. Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, no, I love that too, because I think I've heard some things about, like, you need a sort of a core group of 3 to 5 maybe people who are I could call them in the middle of the night if my sign's been defaced, and like they'll come and take it out and replace it. And the people who, well, Jalana was saying, walking with signs on their back to go get to put some signs out. Like, you need to have the core group of people. And often your campaign manager is doing both the like big strategic thinking, and then when somebody falls through or something falls through, they're there, like you're stepping in and doing the on the ground work as well. It's so it's that kind of duality and that adaptability and adjusting to what the circumstances are. And I think that it's really important to think of, like, who are those key people And then everybody else having some different tasks. So like we had like data entry and different things that people can do, and like phone, we like would just print off lists from the phone book of streets, like here's everyone in this street, just start calling, because you know, just so that it gives people things to do, that they're getting engaged. I mean, still helpful work, it's going to contribute to the campaign long term, but it's not maybe necessarily as strategic, but it gives people tasks so that they can feel engaged with the campaign. So I think those are like such important tips about how to mobilize a team. I love that.
Yeah, and I'm looking over, there's a Lindell sign that I keep tripping over in my kitchen right now. But for instance, so Lindell's car died a few days ago. We had to get the signs out. And so then I said strategically, you keep 50 signs, let me have 30 signs, give your parents who live at the opposite end 20 signs. We have a friend who's a business owner, give her 20 signs, so that we have them throughout the neighborhood. And then Caitlin was referring to the other day, people were waiting for the signs. So I called a friend. I said, hey, what are you doing? You want to go on a sign walk with me? Took 10 signs and we just put them out. So I'm doing lots of different types of things. None are glamorous.
there's no glamour in it. No, it's mostly, but it is that, it's being able to do that, both that sort of strategic thinking and then being just willing to kind of jump right in whenever you're needed, for sure.
So Caitlin, do you want to talk about getting out the vote?
Yes, an important part of the campaign here. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And you should all be, we are a few slides ahead here. There we go. All right. So this is, so we're going to talk about getting out the vote, ultimately the most important part of a campaign, turning your supporters into voters. So as Jalana was just discussing, you don't really have a campaign without a campaign team. And Jalana kind of did her sort of conceptualization of mobilizing teams. And another way to think of it, the way that I often think of it, is sort of plan, collaborate, support, execute. And the campaign is constantly a cycle of cycling through these things. In terms of the planning and collaboration phase, I like to try and think about taking an anti-oppression feminist approach that brings everybody together from the beginning. So get all your campaign team gathered from the planning stage and ensure that they are part of that process, and that their ideas are being incorporated and their perspectives are being brought to bear on the plan. And that helps to really set the tone of your campaign. It also helps to create this collaborative atmosphere, so your team members feel that their contributions are valued. It helps as a campaign manager and as a candidate to learn more about each other, about your team, learn where your strengths and gaps are, and determine how people want to be supported. You can assess people's level of commitment and their level of interest, or what their interests are. And it also creates buy-in in your campaign ultimately at the end of the day. And so once you've set out your plan, your campaign manager is going to be following up with your team members and supporting them in executing the work. And as obviously each campaign is going to be unique, and you're going to face different hurdles and challenges throughout. So you're going to have to pivot and adapt and adjust as you go. So you're going to keep coming back to planning and collaborating, and then supporting the team and in executing their work. And ultimately, at the end of the day, all of this is aimed at the most important goal, which is getting out the vote. Because you can have the best platform and objectively the best candidate, but if you don't get out the vote, your candidate won't be their representative. So really, really important element of the campaign. So there's sort of two pillars of a campaign. You have your policy and communications piece. And this is sort of, we started talking about this at the beginning, a bit about your why, understanding your brand, understanding, kind of developing what themes you should be able to take all of your policy and platform pieces and put them into some sort of key themes, and so that they're really accessible to folks, right? So maybe your themes are poverty reduction and transportation and, I don't know, climate change, whatever it is, right? Some of those are probably a little redundant, but in any case, you've got these pillars or these themes that people can relate to. That's important to sort of distill it down. And then you're working on your messaging. You have, as I say, this policy, your platforms that you've built out, how you're interacting with media, how you're utilizing social media, and all of it needs to be strategic and fit into your brand. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is persuade and identify voters and then get your voters to the polls. So you try not, you want to be mindful not to get off track and to keep within that strategic framework. So in terms of get out the vote, it's seen mostly as an operations and implementation side issue, but it also, I think, it runs through both. In terms of your actually getting out the vote, what we're talking about really is the whole thing. So starts from day one of your campaign. Phase one is the majority of your campaign, and so this is when we're persuading and identifying supporters. Very important. But phase two is absolutely essential, and this is just leading up to and including election day, and that's motivating and confirming the votes. So that's turning your persuaded and identified supporters into actual votes. And again, all of that hard work that you've done throughout the campaign means nothing if people don't mark the X next to your candidate's name. So what you need for your get out the vote strategy, that's the phase two. So when you're just leading into election day, you're going to need your list of your identified supporters and how you're going to contact them. So do you only have addresses? Do you have phone numbers? Do you have social media accounts? How are you going to get in touch with them? You're going to have your volunteers, and you're going to have information of where do people vote? How do they vote? What are the rules? You need to have all that ready to go for election day. So getting yourself organized for election day, you want to make sure that you might have a get out the vote chair, or it might be your campaign manager, depending on the size of your campaign. But you're going to want to make sure that all of your volunteers, so you're recruiting volunteers. And as Jalana was mentioning, this day, election day, is when your campaign is going to swell to the biggest number that you're going to have for the whole campaign. It's the day, it's E-Day. So this is what everything builds to. And so you're gonna wanna recruit those volunteers, and then you wanna train them, because you do not want an embarrassing situation where one of your, people will recall Maggie Burton had the branded purple shirts with the beautiful Maggie Burton branding on them, and our volunteers were wearing them all the time. People had the buttons. Everyone looked so sharp and dapper in them. I loved them. But you don't want somebody walking into a polling place wearing their Maggie Burton, one of your volunteers wearing their Maggie Burton shirt, because that's not allowed. It's against the rules. And then people are going to say, oh, well, Maggie Burton was breaking the campaign rules. Well, you don't, or you could potentially face penalties. You don't want that. That's a really negative story to have happen. So your training is absolutely essential. Make sure you know the rules, make sure everybody understands what their roles are, and are very clear on what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do and all that. So training is key here. You have your election day team may include some or all or multiple of these various different folks. So obviously your candidate is going to kind of pivot on that day. So they've been out campaigning and really kind of working towards persuading people. And now everything is shifting to getting those voters through the doors of the polling place. And so also make sure that all of your volunteers have voted, and make sure that your candidate votes. And usually you want to get your candidate out voting first thing in the morning. You can get your nice photo op right at the beginning, and then you can use that throughout the day to encourage people to vote. And I just wanted to talk briefly about motivating voters, because I find this personally very fascinating. So there's a lot of research into how do we get people to actually vote. And there have been studies that have shown that scripts that guided people to think about or think through those logistical details of their plans for voting, such as when they intended to head to the polls, how they were going to get there, and what they were doing beforehand, were more than twice as effective as standard scripts at getting people to vote. There's also personal accountability is a tool that can be used in terms of getting people to vote. So there was a study in 2010 where researchers sent a group of potential voters a mailing that encouraged them to vote. And then they sent another group the same mail out, but in the top corner, they had a little box that said, "We may call you after the election to talk about your voting experience." And adding that increased the effectiveness of the mail out by almost half in terms of the number of voters voting that it stimulated. So that personal accountability can be really, really effective as well. And another thing that often I think we get wrong, or we assume the opposite, that we assume that if you say, "Oh my goodness, like people aren't voting, you really have to get out and vote," that would encourage people to vote. But actually it's the opposite. We're social creatures. And so we are more motivated to vote by seeing others vote. So everybody else is out voting, I should be voting too. And so there's a study where researchers actually found that people were more likely to head to the polls if they were encouraged to see this sort of noble aspect of their character as being a voter. So one way they did this was to use nouns rather than verbs. And so one version of this study used self-relevant nouns. So how important is being a voter to you, or how important is it to for you to be a voter? And another one used the verb, how important is it for you to vote in the upcoming election? And they found that the noun or personal identity phrasing increased voting registration in two of the studies by a third, and in an actual voter turnout study it increased registration and voting in two states that they used it in, and increased voter turnout by a third. So really interesting in terms of also think about, like, you need to be strategic. How are you going to actually ensure that your voters, especially if you have a smaller campaign, if you maybe don't have you don't have as many marks, you don't have as many supporters, you don't have the numbers that you maybe would like to have, you need to verify, confirm, make sure that every single person that you have as a yes supporter has walked through the doors of the polls and has checked an X, because as I say, otherwise what's the use, right? You won't get elected, and we won't have these incredible voices around the decision-making table. So really important. It's also important to realize that there's lots of resources out there. Equal Voice has a number of resources. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities has a Women in Politics handbook that was my go-to document. I read it and read through it, and it's dog-eared and has highlights and all sorts, and I used it as an essential guide. There's democracy kits, and there's, I'm happy to chat Councillor Stoyles has said that she's happy to speak to people. Like, feel free to contact people that you know of who've done this. People are usually pretty willing to spare some time to help guide you. As I say, I was very fortunate in that Jalana was willing to send me some resources as well. And Maggie had Sheila O'Leary offered us to share campaign space, so we were super fortunate in that way. I had the opportunity to learn from Evelyn Riggs and Judy Vanta and these very seasoned campaign managers and volunteers. And so the resources are there. You just ask. Most people are really willing to help out, and if they aren't, they're usually willing to tell you who will. So just remember that getting out the vote is is what it's all about. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. So got to keep that running through the whole campaign. So that's it for my presentation here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you. That was helpful for me. Refresher. Yeah,
it's always good to see somebody else's sort of method.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about some of the hurdles and successes from Lindell's campaign in 2016. And I'll start with the hurdles. So like I said, we were both new to politics. There were a lot of incumbents running again. Some of the folks who were running in the district against him had been either elected previously municipally or provincially or federally. So we had some folks who had name recognition and also experience running a campaign, maybe even lawn signs that they already owned, and those can be expensive. Yeah. Another hurdle was kind of getting organized and staying organized. So, and I think that's been a challenge this time around as well. But at the same time, so I think last time around when we look at dates on YouTube and say, oh, we posted the promotional video Labor Day weekend, and this time we posted one maybe 4 days ago. So we've been feeling really behind, but at the same time, I think it's kind of worked out because I think people's attention spans when it comes to a municipal election is not the same as it was in 2016, because there's so much else that people are thinking about in their personal lives. And so I don't think it makes sense for us to be kind of waging this 2-month campaign right now. I think 3 weeks is about all that folks have. It's all that I have right now. But I mean, we've been working up to this, but in terms of the public piece of the campaign, it really feels like it's a 3-week campaign. But it's been challenging to kind of get organized and to decide, are we going to door knock? Are we not going to door knock? Are we going to host events outside? Will we not host events? And does Lindell wear a mask throughout the whole campaign video? It's just, it's challenging to kind of figure out what this is going to look like. And it was also challenging in 2016 without a pandemic. And I mentioned signs. I think signs were a hurdle for us because where are you going to get them? There was some person who I think all of the folks who ran in the district got their signs from the same person, and they kept saying they were coming. And I was kind of like, who is this person? We paid him money. The signs came, and then the big signs. So then you have to kind of figure out how you're going to get those big signs up on lawns. So we were really fortunate to have help from folks who've worked federally and provincially. And so one of the sign people for one of the provincial parties let us borrow their wood frames for large signs, which was really great. And then you got to figure out where to put them. And so we ended up putting up our big signs maybe 4 days before Election Day. Everybody thought it was kind of part of our momentum, but it wasn't. It was just, that was, by the time we got ready to put them up, it was close to the day, but it worked out well. But yeah, signs were tricky. And then figuring out, do we put them on public property? Do we not? And getting them out to people. So yeah, those things can, have a sign person if you can. And then one of the hurdles, I think, was Lindell kind of defining who he was as a candidate. We had a slogan, "It's time," but because, you know, there wasn't a lot of diversity on city council, and there still isn't in Halifax, folks really
Or in
wanted,
St. John's.
right,
So, yeah.
right. But folks really wanted to kind of make his whole story that he was this young Black guy, and he's like the Black candidate. And that race was kind of the first thing that folks who were writing about it or interviews would want to talk about. And that is true of who he is and how he identifies, but it's not the only thing that's true about him. And it's not really the reason he was running. It's not the thing that makes him the best candidate. His lived experience does make him a great candidate, but he's also a really great community organizer. He's a really great listener. He was really passionate about actually being a counselor and really interested in issues that come up at City Hall. So we really had to try to pivot away from race being the only issue. And I think that was challenging at times, but we were able to kind of figure it out. So that was a hurdle. In terms of successes, I would say that finding volunteers was really great. And we were able to find, most of our volunteers had also never worked on a campaign before, but it was really nice to help people get involved in politics for the first time, similar to both of us. And those folks feel, and even when we see them out now, or if they're helping out now, there's kind of like this idea, oh yeah, I've done this before. And so helping to encourage a whole new wave of people to get involved. I think that was a success for us. Lindell made history in a sense. He wasn't the youngest counselor. When he was door knocking, he actually met the person who was the youngest city councilor to be elected. But to be the first Black counselor in 18 years, first counselor of color in 18 years, that felt like history to us. Of course, we never forget who came before him. But for a lot of folks, they hadn't seen someone who looked like them in a long time on council. And I think a success was lasting engagement. So there are folks who are engaged in municipal government now because Lindell was elected, and they continue to be, which is really exciting. And I think one of our other successes was that we knew the rules. So Caitlin talked about knowing the rules, really important. And there were things that happened at polling stations on election day. I could call, I don't remember what their exact titles, but the folks at the city who ran the election, and I knew their numbers. I had their cell phone numbers, and I could say this signage is off, or we need this to happen. And so it was really great to kind of know what the rules were. And then I think our biggest success was getting out the vote. So Lindell, so there's 7 candidates, and he took, I think, 53% of the vote. So that means that every second person who voted that day voted for him, which is amazing when there's 7 people running. Yeah. So I think that was a big success. We had no idea. I was nervous right up until we got all the results in. And so, but to this day, it's just exciting to think about that many people choosing him a first-time candidate.
Yeah, that resonates so much for me. Like, so yeah, signs are a huge pain. And especially if you're new, there's like all sorts of, like we didn't have a carpenter, right? So you have to build, like you have to literally build a structure to hold up a sign. It's nothing that I ever thought that I would have to learn how to do. And you have to do it in all sorts of weird places, because especially like so Maggie ran citywide. So in order to get the impact, you need the big signs by the highway. And it's like, they're a huge undertaking. And we were so fortunate that we had people who had the patience and like when, like got the lumber and also, anyways, went out and just made it happen, who hadn't ever done it before. Some of them looked like we're a little off kilter, I'll say. But they got up. And they, you know, and at the end of the day, that's what we needed. We needed to have that, you know, first time candidate. We needed to get that name recognition. We needed her name and face out there. So it got the job done. I think that defining your own narrative, again, is very similar to Lindell's situation, a young woman, first-time candidate, like people have in their minds already who she is. So one of the things, I guess it was a hurdle and a success, I think, is sort of defining her own narrative. People kept saying like, oh, well, you can only have like 1 or 2 policies and like nobody's going to listen to anything beyond that. We had like a 29-point, fully fleshed out policy platform with like everything. And it was people found things in there that they related to. People felt like it added credibility. She was young and she had this professional, thoughtful platform. So like really finding those ways to like you define your own narrative, not letting people dictate to you who you are as a candidate or what you should, like what sort of box you have to fit into. You kind of have to define that yourself. And so that's why I think thinking about your brand and your campaign and why it matters to you at the very beginning is so important, because you just don't want other people to create that narrative for you. So I think that really resonated. And also having the first time involvement in politics, it's been something that's been so rewarding, is seeing all, like, it was like this breeding ground of new people who hopefully will in their time become candidates and campaign managers and volunteers and I've seen many of them getting more and more involved over time. And so that's been, it's a hugely rewarding aspect of the campaign, of Maggie's campaign. I think access to the media was another challenge. I'm sure it was always hard because they would give if a municipal issue came up, they would talk to the current municipal councilors, but then would say, oh, well, we can't talk to you because it's a campaign. And so if we talk to you, we have to talk to all the other candidates. And it's like, no, but it's not, but you're already talking, you know, the incumbents have such a huge advantage. So it was, so there's sort of challenges in that, but at the same time, again, defining the narrative, having the platform, using social media, using the tools that were available to get the message out was very helpful. So we've done a lot of talking. I would love to hear from folks if they had any questions, whether they are volunteering for a campaign, have been involved. I see Isabel, maybe put up her hand inadvertently. Throw up your hand if you wanted to ask us a question, or you can put it in the Q&A. Awesome, thank you, Gabina. So we'll take a few minutes if folks have any questions. But there's a lot of that resonated as well with my experience. It's a challenge, but it's also really rewarding and amazing to see people coming out who haven't necessarily been involved before.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it was new for me too, so, but it meant that this time around, I was less anxious about it, and I had a sense of what was needed. And it made it a little bit easier to think about working with Lindell during a pandemic, because I had done it before.
Yeah, so that's the first question Isabel asked. So what was the biggest challenge now with COVID?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a really good question. The biggest challenge was that the municipalities were asking the province to actually pause the election. So the question around whether or not there's even going to be an election. So for a while, it was hard to get excited and enthusiastic, and I think even hard for incumbents and folks who want to throw their name in. That's presented a challenge in terms of just engagement. So right now, I would say engagement with voters is challenging. So we've decided not to go door knocking because I think it's just too complicated. Really, it gets complicated very quickly, and the risk, it could maybe it's low because there's one active case right now in Halifax, but It's just, we just decided it's not worth it for us. If Lindell was not the incumbent, perhaps we would have felt differently. So I would say voter engagement. That is probably the biggest challenge running a campaign during COVID. And then also just being out. This time of year, there's markets, there's just all kinds of things happening. So usually, and even in the summer, so Lindell was quite visible in July and August, but this time it's different. All his meetings are online, so he's at home most of the time for work. And so where do you see people? When are you going to see people? So that's also been a challenge too. But folks are still engaged, which is really nice. So we'll see what happens on election day. And that's the other thing. We don't know how people are going to feel about voting. We have online voting here, and this is the second time around. But it's unclear how people are going to feel about getting to the polls on election day.
Yeah, it's interesting to have online voting too, but okay, that's awesome. Samantha Evans is wondering about where to find information about election rules and key dates. So that's going to depend on which election you're running in and where you are geographically. But there's an Elections Act online. If you even just search for where you're running. So if you're running City St. John's, you're running City of Mount Pearl or Halifax, you can search that. So if you're running in a municipality in Newfoundland and Labrador, you're under the Municipal Elections Act. So that's where the legislation that you're looking for is. And there's some information on the provincial website around what those elections look like. And then there's some specific rules for different municipalities. So I think City of Mount Pearl is going to answer. Oh, we got it. Yeah. So I hope that, I don't know, Jalana, do you want to speak to where they would find those resources in?
Right on halifax.ca website, there's a web page that says information for candidates. I think there's a pretty handy kind of PDF guide. And then if you want to go right into the act, you can do that, but the guide is pretty helpful. So online voting was new in 2016. So I made sure that I understood the rules around online voting. I wanted to know what we could and couldn't do. And I was surprised the information that was provided by the city in the act was pretty, I should remember, I do have a legal background. So I'm used to you reading kind of legislation and acts and things like that. So I should also say, if you're reading these rules and guidelines and they're not clear to you, pick up the phone, call your municipality. They need to be able to answer those questions for you if they're not clear. So that's another option that you have, is that there are folks who should be available to answer your questions.
Definitely. Yeah, the websites of the different municipalities usually have a fair bit of information there for sure. So we have someone who asked, how much does it cost to run a campaign? And that is like such a moving target, I think. Definitely depends on whether you're running at large or a ward, mayoral, like they each have different sort of costs. And something that actually we've been advocating here locally is for disclosure of campaign expenses, because right now we have fundraising disclosure, but not expenses being disclosed. And I think that that'd be really helpful. I think if we had known, if we had a template of like what the last city councilors who ran at large had spent and what they spent their money on, would be a good place to start. In terms, it's quite helpful to know what your competitors are spending. It doesn't mean that you have to spend as much as they do, but yeah, and it really it's going to depend. But also, like, reach out to people who've done it before. Some people will usually be able. Some places it's already disclosed as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I will just to share, throw some numbers out first. So for instance, we're not door knocking, so we're going to do a mail out to every resident in the district, which is about 20,000 people. So that's going to cost about $3,500. Signs, I can't remember, but I think they're not cheap. I remember we paid maybe 2,500, maybe 2,000 for signs, and I don't think we would have gotten more than 250, 300 maybe. And then we're paying for, what else do we pay for? Sometimes ads on Facebook and social media ads, paying for volunteers, foods and beverages. And we hosted events in people's houses. We hosted probably 5 events in people's homes, some outdoor playgrounds. So though you're covering food and things like that. So this time around, the rules have changed. So we will have to submit our expenses after the fact. But it really depends, like Caitlin said. But I would say in Halifax, you're probably looking at least a few $1,000s as a municipal candidate.
Yeah, definitely. And again, so like that's, you know, if you got a ward with 20,000 candidates, that's different than the citywide, which is 70,000 constituents. So like that, all those things are going to impact on your cost for sure. So the next question, I'm just gonna, thanks, Vina. What advice would you give someone young for breaking into politics for the first time, whether it's municipal, provincial, federal, etc., how to build those connections and actually be even able to run when you don't have decades of experience like some other candidates? It's a great question. What do you think, Jalana?
I would say one thing that we did, we talked to a lot of folks last time around. So I met with the incumbent probably twice. I think Lindell met with her once. And she did say, if any of the candidates want to meet with me, I will meet with them. And I don't think anybody really took her up on that offer, but I definitely met with the incumbent. I mean, of course, why not? We met with previous counselors from the district, counselors from other districts. We met with provincial politicians, federal. We just talked to everybody. And so that was really, really, really helpful. One thing I'll say is that about a month prior to the municipal election in Halifax in 2016, there was actually a provincial by-election that took place pretty much in our district. That was very helpful. So I would say get involved as well, volunteer. I actually went door knocking with one of the by-election candidates because I didn't really know what canvassing meant. And that was really great. So I would say talk to people, get involved, and then also participate or observe. So go to city council on council days or watch online. And so try to figure out if are you actually interested in doing this thing? So you know what the job really entails.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and similar. So I would echo that in terms of like go and speak to as many people who've done it as possible. Most people are, you will be surprised at how people love to give advice. So people are usually pretty willing to give you some advice and some tips, and you can take it all with a grain of salt, but ultimately it's useful information about how other people have done it and different ways to do it. So take in as much as you can, make those connections with folks, and they don't have to be old connections. They don't have to be ingrained connections. I think that's kind of part of the sort of moral of of Lindell's story and Maggie's story is that you can be a new candidate. You can be a fresh face. You don't have to come from a politically connected family to be successful. People want candidates that are going to represent them. That resonates with them if they see themselves reflected in their candidates. So you don't need that in order to be successful. So just sort of echoing back to the conversation about costs, I know that one of our one of the incumbents that Maggie beat, we spent like not even a fifth of what they spent, and she was successful, right? So it doesn't, like, money, like, you need money. Campaigns need money. If you aren't going to run, but you have the financial ability to contribute, donate to campaigns of people who you believe in and you think are going to be good representatives, because it does take money. The mail outs take money, the signs take money, the food, feeding your volunteers, that all takes money. So if you can donate in whatever way, time, money, food, whatever, that's really helpful. So do those things. Get involved in campaigns, try out on somebody else's campaign first. But really, you don't need much. You can run a successful campaign without all that, without coming from a politically or financially connected family, and you can absolutely make a go of it and be successful.
Yeah, I agree. Next question from Sandra. With campaigning, I've been told knocking on as many doors as you can is key. Engaging conversation is key. Is that even possible? And I think this is connected to COVID-19. So in Halifax, there's been no rule that you cannot, but many of the incumbents have decided not to. And so we've also decided not to do that this time around. But there have been, there's still kind of markets happening. There's an event on Saturday that Lindell went to. He's seeing a lot of people that way. He's biking around, seeing people that way. And even actually dropping signs off. He was dropping some signs off on the weekend, and someone comes out of their house, and then the neighbor comes out, and then four of the neighbors, and they're having a socially distant conversation. And then, of course, there's the internet. Not everybody's on the internet, but you can engage that way. So you just have to, there was no choice really, even though the municipalities asked the province to press pause on the election, the province did not. So here we are, there's an election again, and we just have to figure it out. So there's about 2.5 weeks left. One thing we're still trying to figure out is engaging with seniors, independent living, and also folks who are in situations where there's more care provided on site. Those are typically places where polling stations are even set up. I don't think that's going to be happening for many reasons this year. So I've been trying to engage with folks, even at Northwood, where my grandmother lives, and asking how can we engage, because folks still have a right to vote, and we obviously want to keep them safe, but we don't want to ignore them. I think keeping people safe doesn't mean ignoring people. So trying to figure out with Northwood, maybe we create a special flyer that's like, hello Northwood residents, something, just so people know we're thinking about them. And it's important that they feel like they're part of this process as well, as I would say even more so than before. So it's different. I don't know, I'll let you know after October 17th. We're fortunate to have engaged people previously, fortunate that Lindell's job is to be engaged as an incumbent, as a counselor. So people are emailing him about problems and issues all day, every day anyway. So that helps. But door knocking, we've decided not to do that this time.
Yeah, I think that it makes a lot of sense, and it certainly presents a challenge. There's no doubt, because it is really like bread and butter stuff is going and knocking on doors. So it's definitely a whole different ballgame without that.
Yeah. So our get out the vote strategy will look different, because we haven't accumulated as much information, because when you go to the doors, you're marking down and keeping track of who your supporters are, as Caitlin mentioned, so you can reach out to them on election day. So we don't have as much of that information. So we are going to have to, our get out the vote strategy is going to, like, on election day, we're gonna have to figure out how to make a lot of noise knowing that we're also going to be reminding our opponents, supporters to vote, but that's a risk we're going to have to take this time around, and a risk we're a lot more comfortable taking because there's only 3 people running versus 7, and Lyndall happens to be the incumbent.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that, you know, and as you say, like, you kind of just have to play it as strategically as you can. And there's always costs and, you know, weighing those different pieces. So yeah, that's, it's really interesting. We'll have to look forward to seeing how it goes, and then figuring it all out here next year. Yeah. So someone has asked, if you run for city council in Mount Pearl, can you keep a private job? Now, I don't know if there's any specific rules in Mount Pearl. I know that in St. John's, people absolutely continue to work their regular jobs while being city councilors. It is not a super high paying job to be a councilor. The mayor and deputy mayor, because they are the administrative, have administrative functions, they get a somewhat higher wage, and so those folks are expected to work full-time at being the mayor and deputy mayor, but councilors are not required to. I mean, Maggie decided that she would not do her other job, that she would do be a city councilor full-time, but that's not the decision at all. Certainly we know that other city councilors are working, doing their regular jobs at the same time. So yeah, that's a decision you're going to have to sort of make. And I don't think there's any rules, as far as I know, in Mount Pearl, at least.
And I don't think there's any rules in the municipality of Halifax. I think you can still keep your full-time job. Lindell was an employee of the city. He worked for the library. So he actually had to take a leave to campaign even. And I couldn't, we just had to be careful around campaign. The library he worked at happened to be in this district, very close to where he lived. So before he took his leave, if I had to talk to him about something, I wouldn't go to his place of work to talk about it. And once he took his leave, there's certain things he couldn't do in the library, even though we needed to print things and staple things. And often it was kind of a
You've got Jalana frozen there. Yeah, a bit of a leap there, sorry.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, great. So he does it full time, and I don't think he'd have the capacity to take on other work. I'm not sure about other counselors, but he also works really hard as a counselor. And I think not everybody does. It's, you know, you choose your own path once you're elected. But it's a very time-consuming job for him. I don't think he could imagine having another job. But I think if you're a business owner, you know, you don't have to shut that down. You don't have to kind of close the doors or anything like that if you can maintain that. So you can technically, but it can be, I think, challenging for a lot of people. But different municipalities are different, and being a counselor in certain places might not be as demanding depending on the population and things like that.
Yeah, well, those were great questions. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, definitely. It's a funny time to be thinking about this stuff, I will say. It's very top of the brain.
It's good that it's top of the brain for you, because it's still like, it's 3 years ago for me. So I've got to kind of start thinking about it all again. We got 1 year sort of runway to the next election. So.
Yeah. So does that mean you'll be managing a campaign next year?
I'm not committing to anything at this point.
Okay. Okay. That's what I said a year ago. And probably even 2 months ago.
Thank you so much to the both of you. I would also just note that in the chat there, the City of Mount Pearl and Councillor Fry did confirm that you can still keep your full-time job if you run for City Council in Mount Pearl. So thank you for those answers. so it looks like those are all the questions we have for today, and this is a good end point. Thank you both so much. It was really interesting to hear how, you know, even with your different candidates, how parallel your campaigns were, and to hear the perspectives of, you know, putting someone on council who was very different from who was already established, and how you needed to sort of adjust your campaigns with respect to that. So thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for joining us tonight, especially on this incredibly beautiful night in town here. I don't know what it's like in Halifax, but it's really gorgeous out tonight here. And yeah, we'll end up there. Thank you.
Thanks everyone
Thanks for
so much.
participating. Thanks for having us. It was great to be a part of this and appreciate the invitation. And good luck to all the future campaign managers and candidates and future counselors and provincial folks and federal folks. So good luck.
Absolutely. Good luck. Thank you, everyone. And go out and get involved in all the next upcoming campaigns. And hopefully we'll be in touch and hearing from a bunch of excited new candidates. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye,
Oh, and
everyone.
also thank you to everyone at the YWCA and St. John's and the City of Mount Pearl who put this event together. It's fantastic.
Yes,
Good night.
thanks for the invite. Good night, everyone.
Okay, good night.